I think the entire political spectrum has been turned on its head. Partly because of Donald Trump. I think that may be something we can credit Donald Trump with. In the midst of chaos, things get reorganized, and sometimes it can fall and end up being something better. And actually, it may not even be that poetic. It might just simply be a reactionary response to how ridiculous Donald Trump actually is. And we saw that in the race last night in Kansas. With James Thompson came, I believe, was 6.8%. He lost only by 6.8% in a traditionally Republican district, the 4th District of Kansas. I think that's a direct result of the chaos that Donald Trump has brought to the table. And the fact that many buyer's remorse would be an understatement. I think most people now are looking at Donald Trump as legitimately too unstable for the job. And he's losing support amongst every group, every demographic. He's starting now at this point to lose support amongst some of his most staunchly ardent, backers. The alt-right, the people who really went to him just for the hatred and the xenophobia and the bigotry, the people who were really turned on by that, they're even having to abandon him for different reasons, right? We're not all people who are abandoning Trump aren't abandoning him for the same reason. Some people are abandoning him because they finally realize that he is as ridiculous as we've been telling everyone that he is. And then others are abandoning him because he's made dramatic shifts on his foreign policy, which we'll discuss momentarily. But the end result could very well be some of these safe Republican districts start swinging for Democrats. Now, here's why that's important, number one. And number two, here's why the Democratic Party actually we'll get to number two in a minute. It's important, obviously, for the legislation purposes. I mean, that goes without saying. I mean, getting the House back is very important in terms of stopping Trump's agenda. You can't wait 4 years. It has to be done in 2 years. They have to pull the House back. But also, it provides an opportunity for non-establishment Democrats to get in office. Because the Democratic Party is not going to invest in a lot of these districts. We saw that out of the Kansas race last night. And it's not so much out of gross incompetence. I was reading a thread by Matt Stoller of a couple of outlets. I don't want to misname the outlets he writes for. But part of that is calculated. Part of the reason they don't invest in these districts is calculated because they want to select precisely who they want to be a Democrat in Congress. And this is the case, but the opportunity here is really for people who are not establishment players to get name recognition in districts that are disillusioned because of how absolutely ridiculous Donald Trump is. Does that mean that they're going to win every single one of them? Probably not. But does that mean that we could chip away at the stranglehold that these politicians who have been in these positions have had for a long time? Can we loosen the stranglehold? Absolutely. And so that's why it's important for us to pay attention to these races. The other side of the coin is not just to pay attention to congressional races, but state and local races. This is so important. You see out of North Carolina last night how North Carolina had a bill being sponsored by 3 Republicans to block or to rule void the Supreme Court decision in Obergefell versus Hodges. Right. So, this shows you that the fight is not only on the federal level. And I think that's one of the Democrats, I know that's one of the Democrats' number one failing is that in the midst of losing seats in Congress and Senate, they lost houses in state houses, state senates, gubernatorial races. They lost them in a spectacular fashion. And this is where the fight really is. The glamour may be in Washington, D.C. for those people who are interested into that kind of thing. But the real fight, legislative fights are happening on the state levels. And we need to push back against the red onslaught, not Russia, the Republican Party. last but not least is this it's important because in the midst of us fighting neoliberalism and the rightward shift of the Democratic Party towards the Democratic Party towards the Republican Party, we're actually in a whole different fight right now. We're in a fight just to keep to stop the hemorrhaging, to keep the little ground that we gained. Right there, and I've described this multiple times as we have to do both but the reality of it is that we're faced with an onslaught from not only neoliberalism, but conservatism, ultra conservatism, like we haven't seen in a long time. And so this is why it's important for us. It's not as simple as blue versus red. It's never that simple. It is the quality of the candidate. It is what that candidate stands for, what they've done in the past, what they really represent, who they really represent. Do they represent the people or do they represent corporate interests? It does have a lot to do with that. But then there's also the dynamic that is underlying that we're fighting against right now, very loud, alive and visceral, is the conservative movement that wants to undo any progress. I get that we have a long way to go, but we have people who are legitimately trying to undermine any progress whatsoever. And we have to hold the line. We absolutely have to hold the line. And then once we can hold the line, or simultaneously, depends on how good of a fighter you are, we have to hold the line and then start to push back and get some actual left-leaning progressivism in the United States. So anyway, that's my take. What's your take? Caller, you're live on the air.